General Meeting, His Excellency Ambassador Albert Muchanga, Commissioner of Economic Development, Trade, Industry and Mining, and African Union Commissioner, His Excellency the Prime Minister of Bahamas, Mr. Philip Davis, His Excellency the former President of the Republic of Nigeria, Olusegun Obasanjo, His Excellency the former Vice President of Nigeria, Mr. Namadi Sambu, His Excellency Muhammadu Issoufou, former President of Niger and AFCFTA Champion Sites Oversight Committee, His Excellency Yves Ferman Mamfoubi, Minister of Trade and Industry of Gabon and Chair of the African Ministers of Trade and Industry, His Excellency Honorable Kerry Simons, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade of Barbados, His Excellency Wamkele Mene, Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat, Her Excellency Dr. Vera Songwe, Board Chair, Dr. Vera Songwe, Board Chair, Liquidity and Sustainability Facility Continental Organizations, all protocols observed, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, and let me take this opportunity to wish all fathers in the house a happy Father's Day. On behalf of the President of the Republic of Ghana, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, I say a big welcome, or Akwaba, to Accra, Ghana, for this year's Afreximbank annual meetings. The 30th annual meetings also coincide with the celebration of Afreximbank's 30th anniversary. So let me thank the bank for choosing Ghana as the host of your 30th anniversary landmark events. Indeed, Accra, Ghana also hosts the Secretariat of the African Continental Free Trade Area, which makes it the most appropriate place to commemorate 3 decades of successes in promoting intra-African trade by Africa's foremost trade finance institution, the Afreximbank. Mr. Chairman, the overarching theme for this year's meetings is delivering the vision, building prosperity for Africans. The chosen theme appropriately offers an opportunity to all stakeholders gathered here, not only to celebrate the success of Afreximbank over the last 30 years, but also to reflect on how we can meaningfully contribute to Africa's recovery process after the pandemic and speed up intra-African trade, improve Africa's trade performance in the global marketplace through the creation of a single market for goods and services, promote industrial development through diversification and regional value chain development, and also enhance capital flows into Africa. Since its establishment 3 decades ago, Afreximbank has transitioned into a first-class supranational financial institution, championing African trade and driving growth across multiple sectors in Africa. Evidence of the bank's interventions are numerous and includes infrastructural investments to support intra-African trade, investments in agriculture and industry, trade facilitation, trade guarantee and advisory services, and country-specific programs to support those in dire economic situations, among others. Afreximbank has also introduced platforms designed to improve and facilitate trade in Africa, including the Mansa Repository Platform, the Pan-African Payments and Settlement Systems, and the Intra-African Trade Fair. Your Excellencies, Honorable Ministers, during the last 3 decades, Afreximbank has achieved several milestones in line with the vision of Agenda 2063, the Africa we want. That vision encapsulates not only Africa's aspirations for the future, but also identifies flagship programs which can boost Africa's economic growth. The highlights of the accomplishments directly relate to upscaling intra-African trade through Afreximbank's collaborations, programs, and projects, and include the establishment of the Afreximbank's Trade Impact Mitigation Facility platform, where Afreximbank intervened strongly during the COVID-19 pandemic and disbursed over $8 billion to central banks and commercial banks to avert trade payment defaults. Part of this funding also went into the procurement of test kits, personal protective equipment, and other COVID-19 containment materials in member states. The bank also disbursed over $5 billion to member states and businesses towards the procurement of food, fertilizer, and grains as the Russian-Ukraine crisis unfolded. Working with the UNECA, the African Union, and the AFCFTA Secretariat, Afreximbank created a pooled procurement platform termed as the Africa Trade Exchange to help African countries procure grains, edible oils, and fertilizers at reduced costs. Prior to the implementation of the AFCFTA in 2021, Afreximbank disbursed over $20 billion in support of intra-African trade and investments, and projected to double this to $40 billion by end December 2026. Afreximbank is also financing African-owned financial institutions to acquire foreign banks operating in member states with a view to building an interconnected African financial system to help promote intra-African trade. Also, through the Afreximbank Trade Finance Facility, about 500 of the continent's 600 regulated commercial banks have been provided with credit confirmation lines to support intra-African trade. The total amount earmarked for this project is about $8 billion. This funding is aimed at ensuring that every country on our continent has at least one bank that has a dedicated credit line to support intra-African trade. Afreximbank is also collaborating with the African Union Commission and the AFCFTA Secretariat to implement the biannual intra-African trade fairs, which may become the premier marketplace for the promotion of intra-African trade and investments. This, coupled with the establishment of the AFCFTA Adjustment Fund, for which Afreximbank is providing a funding of $10 billion, would help African countries effectively adjust to AFCFTA tariff removals and prepare them to participate in the new trading regime. Ladies and gentlemen, we in Ghana have also benefited from a cordial and productive relationship with Afreximbank over the years. To mention a few, Afreximbank's first official deal was the participation in a syndicated loan to the Ghana Cocoa Board. The bank also provided support to Ghana's Volta River Authority in 2014 to enhance energy generation and help resolve the energy crisis the country experienced during that time. Afreximbank has also had a good working relationship with us, the Bank of Ghana, and facilitated foreign exchange swap arrangements with banks in Ghana to boost foreign exchange liquidity support for Ghana's international trade. Just recently, in the midst of Ghana's economic crisis, Afreximbank agreed to extend a $750 million loan facility to the country to finance capital growth-related expenditures in the 2022 budget. Over the years, various collaborations between Ghana and Afreximbank have resulted in a disbursement of over $2 billion to support various development and trade-related initiatives in Ghana. Your Excellencies, what clearly stands out in Afreximbank's journey over the past 30 years is its collaborative nature in pursuing initiatives, projects, and programs with other African institutions to achieve the African integration agenda. The planned events for this year's Afreximbank meetings will involve critical discussions across various sectors of our economies. So I encourage all of you to participate actively and help broaden the policy discourse with your contributions towards the prosperity of the African continent and its people. I would also urge you all, especially those visiting Accra for the first time, to find time to explore the city, participate in the planned excursions, and enjoy your stay in Ghana. We wish you a pleasant stay in our country. Thank you very much.
Another round of applause, please, for our host, Governor Addison. Now, we also are graced with the presence of another Pan-African champion and a peacemaker extraordinaire, His Excellency, the former President of Nigeria, Olusegun Obasanjo, is with us. Now, from its inception, Afreximbank has been headquartered in Cairo. Egypt's not only been one of the founding shareholders of the bank, it's been an absolute outstanding host country. The Minister of Finance of Egypt is the chairman of this Afreximbank General Meeting, and here to give the opening remarks on his behalf, I want you to welcome the Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Egypt, His Excellency Gamal Negm.
Good morning. First, I would like to thank the government of Ghana for its great hospitality. Honorable former President, Prime Ministers, Governors, Ambassadors, and Ministers. Mr. Chairman of Afreximbank, esteemed guests, African Bank staff, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of His Excellency, the Egyptian Minister of Finance, it gives me a great pleasure to extend to you all a very warm welcome to the 30th annual meeting of the African Export-Import Bank held in this wonderful city, Accra, under the auspices of His Excellency, Mr. Nana Akufo-Addo, President of Ghana. The world economic and financial landscape remain uncertain. As the rest of the world, Africa is facing a number of challenges, from the residual effects of the pandemic, inflationary pressure magnified by the geopolitical tensions, tightening in global finance conditions, the growing impact of climate change, rising risk of debt distress, in large number of countries, and the adverse effects on the demand for African exports. Therefore, there is a strong need to boost regional trade and enact industrial policies for diversification to enhance Africa's resilience to spillover and the contagious effects from the global shocks. And here comes the pivotal role of African Bank across several streams, which are all anchored within the bank's six strategic plan for the period 22-26, focusing on intra-Africa trade, Africa industrialization, and the continental trade leadership in a financially sustainable manner. In this regard, we have to applaud the bank for its efforts and the achievements during 2022 in developing and implementing new solutions to alleviate the negative repercussions from global shocks on the continent. In light of these considerations comes the importance of this year's theme, delivering the vision, building prosperity for Africans, which affirms that leading institutions like Afreximbank have to work collectively towards an integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa, driven by its own citizens, representing a dynamic force in the international arena. Also, the theme strongly aligns Afreximbank's endeavor with the 2063 agenda and the Africa we want. With this esteemed gathering and level of participation, I hope this year's meetings will introduce advanced experiences, exchange thought on cutting-edge theories, and propose constructive ideas and suggestions for the development and prosperity of Africa. I would like to conclude by wishing the Afreximbank every success and successful annual meeting that support its mandate as one of the leading regional institutions that deliver the 2063 vision. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Just before we started the proceedings, I was having a chat with him, and I asked him what his name meant, Gamal Negem, and he said his name means beautiful star, and I think that Egypt has been a beautiful star in the history of Afreximbank, wouldn't you say? What an incredible room is gathered here today. It's just incredible. We also have the Honorable Minister Ken Ofori-Atta, Minister of Finance for the Republic of Ghana. Please acknowledge him. My dear elder brother is here, His Excellency Ambassador Albert Muchanga, Commissioner for Economic Development, Trade and Industry and Mining at the African Union Commission, has graced us with his presence. The Right Honourable Philip Davis, all the way, this is a long way to come, the Prime Minister of Bahamas and the Chair of CARICOM is also here with us. Staying on the theme of Pan-African champions, we have Ms. Nardos Bekele Thomas, CEO of African Union Development Agency, NEPAD. And last but not least, I think I'm told that Madame Zuma, the first woman chairperson of the African Union Commission, is here somewhere. I've not had sight on her. She's here. There you are, right over there. Welcome. Welcome, Ma. The governor mentioned that, of course, Ghana is quite an appropriate place to have the 30th anniversary because it is also home of the AFCFTA Secretariat. The AFCFTA holds within it our hopes and our dreams and our aspirations. I always see it more as not my hopes, but the hope for my children and your children and the future of Africa. The man at the helm of the AFCFTA Secretariat is, of course, His Excellency Wamkele Mene, the Secretary General, and he's here with us to give us a few words. Please come to the podium, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much, Program Director. May I acknowledge the presence here of our former leaders, President Mahamadou Issoufou, former president of Niger and champion of the African Continental Free Trade Area, President Obasanjo, former president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, former vice president also of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, the former Prime Minister of Ethiopia, the Prime Minister of the Bahamas, my senior brother, President Orama, the board of directors of Afreximbank, CEO of Auda Nepad, ministers that are here with us, finance ministers, governors of central banks, our host, Minister Ken Ofori-Atta, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure to be with you here today as we celebrate the 30th anniversary of Afreximbank, an institution that, as we all know, has been at the fore of investing in trade finance in Africa. Afreximbank celebrates 30 years, and this coincides with the 60th anniversary of the Organization of African Unity. In May 1963 is when the OAU was formed. And our founding mothers and fathers, in their wisdom and in their vision, actually already foresaw that there has to be an Afreximbank. That is why, in accordance with that vision of our founding mothers and fathers, if you look at the treaty documents that establish the Organization of African Unity, they clearly set out an objective, and that objective is that we must have economic integration in Africa, and that we must introduce tools to advance that objective of economic integration in Africa. Payments, a seamless payments system, an intra-Africa trade fair, trade finance that is affordable, inclusivity of trade, to make sure that young entrepreneurs, women-led small medium enterprises, that they have an opportunity to contribute to an integrated market in Africa. And so all of these tools, all of these things that Afreximbank has been doing over the last 30 years were foresaw in the founding treaty of the Organization of African Unity. And all of the past presidents, and I know that some of them are here, the past presidents of Afreximbank have also singularly focused on this objective of integration in Africa and trade finance. And so I'm extremely proud that the AFCFTA Secretariat, under the overall leadership of His Excellency Musa Faki Mohammed, that the AFCFTA Secretariat is a very strong partner to Afreximbank, and I said this previously. Afreximbank and the AFCFTA Secretariat are like twins, except one twin was born 30 years earlier, the other twin was born 30 years later. But this relationship is important because if you don't have the finance, after you have eliminated all the barriers to trade that exist, your effort will come to zero. And similarly, if you have the trade finance, but the trade barriers remain, the effort and the objective of Afreximbank will come to naught. And so we have a mutually complementary relationship which shares the objective that comes as far back as May 1963, when our founding mothers and fathers in the great city of Addis Ababa decided that they will establish the Organization of African Unity. We have taken this relationship further under the leadership of President Orama and the board, as well as under the leadership of President Issoufou. We have introduced, as you know, the AFCFTA Adjustment Fund, the Pan-African Payments and Settlement System. Soon we will introduce an Africa-wide transit guarantee scheme. And all of these tools are important because they make trade accessible, they make trade a reality, they reduce the cost of trade, so that across the length and breadth of our continent, millions and millions of small medium enterprises that are led by women, that are led by young entrepreneurs, can see the benefits of a market that we correctly define as a market that by the year 2050 will have a combined GDP of 16.2 trillion United States dollars. But we have to build the future now. We have to build 2050 now. That is why the partnership with Afreximbank is so critical. And I know that my colleagues in the African Union, in the overall family of the African Union, Ambassador Muchanga is here, CEO Nados is here. All of us in the African Union depend on Afreximbank for your support, for your wisdom, and of course to make sure that as Africans, we create and define our own narrative. That as Africans, we rely on ourselves, and that as Africans, it is ourselves, our own institutions, that will create the better future that we want to see. Former chairperson of the African Union Commission, as you've heard, Minister Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma is here with us this morning, and in being the principal architect of Agenda 2063, the Africa that we want, embedded in it is the AFCFTA as one of the flagship projects. And so I am extremely proud that today we join Afreximbank in celebrating 30 years, and I hope that we will continue the very, very strong partnership for Africa's economic advancement and the advancement of our shared ideals, ideals that have a long tradition and a long history. The AFCFTA has been ratified by 47 state parties. Only one member of the African Union has not yet ratified. The political commitment is there. The political will is there. The tools that we require for success, as I mentioned, are there. The Adjustment Fund, the Pan-African Payments and Settlement System, and others are available at our disposal. And I'm also equally grateful that our heads of states and government have continued to entrust President Mahamadou Issoufou with the task of leading us to make sure that the AFCFTA does indeed become a reality in our lifetime. So I want to thank you very much, and I know that President Issoufou is ready to share with you his vision for the next few years in the implementation of the AFCFTA. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, and thank you very much. A round of applause, please, for the Secretary General of the AFCFTA, Wamkele. I would encourage you, when you're here in Ghana, to visit him and his colleagues at the AFCFTA Secretariat, which is just around the corner. It's a few minutes' drive from here. When you get there, make sure that in the forecourt you find a statue. You'll see a statue, only one statue. And this is honors a man they call the AFCFTA champion, a man whose leadership helped birth the biggest free trade area in the world. Please welcome to give the keynote address on the theme Turbocharging the Implementation of the AFCFTA, the former president of Niger, His Excellency Mahamadou Issoufou.
Excellences, Messieurs les anciens présidents de la République, Messieurs les anciens premiers ministres, Excellences, Professeur Orama, Monsieur Wankele, secrétaire général de la ZLECAf, Mesdames et Messieurs, je suis ravi de m'adresser à vous à l'occasion de cette cérémonie du conseil d'administration de la Banque africaine Afreximbank et à l'occasion de ce 30e anniversaire de la création d'Afreximbank ici à Accra, au Ghana. Permettez-moi de saluer et d'apprécier le leadership de mon cher frère Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, président de la République du Ghana. Je voudrais également saluer le professeur Orama pour sa direction, pour l'excellent travail qu'il mène à la tête de notre banque, cette précieuse institution panafricaine de financement du commerce. Tâche extrêmement difficile, surtout quand on sait que le déficit annuel de financement du commerce en Afrique s'élève à quelques 81 milliards de dollars. Je salue également le secrétaire général de la ZLECAf, le dynamique Wankele Mene. Mesdames et Messieurs, alors que notre continent ne s'est pas encore totalement remis des répercussions socio-économiques de la COVID-19, le conflit russo-ukrainien représente une autre menace pour l'Afrique qui dépend fortement des importations alimentaires et des engrais à partir des deux pays. Ce conflit qui a perturbé nos chaînes d'approvisionnement peut être aussi une opportunité. Oui, il peut être une chance de réduire notre dépendance aux importations alimentaires en provenance de l'extérieur du continent. Notre ambition doit être d'assurer notre souveraineté alimentaire. La mise en œuvre du plan du développement agricole de l'Afrique et l'accélération de la mise en œuvre de la zone de libre-échange continentale africaine constituent deux leviers qui peuvent nous y aider et nous permettre de transformer cette crise en opportunité. Dans ce cadre, et en réponse directe aux effets économiques néfastes de la crise ukrainienne, Afreximbank avait approuvé au 31 décembre 2022 des demandes de financement d'environ 8 milliards de dollars. Il s'agit de soutenir l'importation de fournitures essentielles telles que le pétrole, le gaz, les engrais, les céréales et autres intrants agricoles. En outre, le programme a aidé les États membres à respecter leurs obligations de paiement commerciaux arrivant à échéance. Cette intervention s'explique par la nécessité de faire face à l'urgence. Mais notre ambition est de promouvoir des substitutions aux importations. Notre ambition est de produire et promouvoir le commerce intra-africain afin de contribuer à réaliser l'Afrique que nous voulons. Mesdames et messieurs, réaliser l'ambition, construire la prospérité pour les Africains, thème de la présente rencontre, est en cohérence avec le thème de l'année choisi par l'Union africaine qui est accélérer la mise en œuvre de la zone de libre-échange continentale africaine. Partenaire stratégique du processus de la mise en œuvre de la zone de libre-échange continentale africaine, Afreximbank est un acteur clé de cette accélération. Comme on le sait, dans la droite ligne des décisions des chefs d'État et de gouvernement de l'Union africaine, la banque a développé depuis sa création, il y a 30 ans, plusieurs programmes et outils pour appuyer et favoriser l'intégration des économies africaines et renforcer ainsi leur résilience. Ainsi, Afreximbank a activement soutenu le secrétariat de la zone de libre-échange continentale africaine, initialement par le biais d'une subvention de 3 millions de dollars pour les 3 premières années de ces opérations se terminant en 2022. Ce montant a été doublé à 6 millions de dollars pour les 3 prochaines années, jusqu'en 2025. Ces subventions ont été utilisées pour soutenir les négociations, l'engagement du secteur privé et le plaidoyer sur la zone de libre-échange continentale africaine. Afreximbank apporte également son soutien en fournissant le personnel indispensable et toute autre assistance technique souhaitée par le secrétariat dans le fort opportunément soutenu, le processus ayant conduit à l'adoption par le 36e sommet des chefs d'État et de gouvernement du protocole
You guys are taking all the... What you need to record is there.
Et au développement des exportations. Mesdames et messieurs, l'accord de la zone de libre-échange continentale africaine introduira des perturbations socio-économiques, notamment des pertes fiscales, des impacts négatifs sur des secteurs industriels, les entreprises et les chaînes d'approvisionnement, des pertes d'emplois, etc. Conformément aux décisions des chefs d'État et de gouvernement de l'Union africaine, Afreximbank et le secrétariat ont mis en place le fonds d'ajustement de la zone de libre-échange continentale africaine. D'un montant global de 10 milliards de dollars, le fonds devrait aider les pays à s'adapter au nouveau contexte de la zone de libre-échange continentale africaine, soutenir le développement d'infrastructures propices au commerce, préparer les États parties et les entreprises à améliorer leur compétitivité afin de participer au nouveau régime commercial et profiter des opportunités offertes par le marché continental unique dans le cadre de la zone de libre-échange continentale africaine. Afreximbank a déjà mis 1 milliard de dollars à la disposition du fonds d'ajustement et continue à travailler avec le secrétariat pour mobiliser des fonds supplémentaires. En Afrique, nous faisons face également aux coûts et frais de transfert lors des transactions commerciales intra-africaines. En partenariat avec la Commission de l'Union africaine et le secrétariat de la ZLECAf, Afreximbank a lancé le système panafricain de paiement et de règlement, PAPS, pour permettre d'effectuer des paiements intra-africains en devise nationale. Le PAPS, soutenu par une facilité de règlement de 3 milliards de dollars d'Afreximbank, constitue la base sur laquelle émergeront les monnaies africaines fortes et convertibles demain. Pour booster le commerce, les communautés africaines des affaires ont besoin de plateformes, de rencontres et d'échanges. Je tiens à saluer la création et la tenue de la foire commerciale intra-africaine qui a déjà connu 2 éditions, et celle du Forum d'affaires de la zone de libre-échange continentale africaine, dont la première édition s'est tenue les 28 et 29 avril dernier au Cap en Afrique du Sud. Les éditions de toutes ces plateformes ont connu un franc succès. Au regard des résultats enregistrés, de la détermination des parties prenantes, notamment le secrétariat de la ZLECAf et Afreximbank, du ferme engagement à tous les niveaux, nous pouvons conclure que nous sommes sur la bonne voie. Mesdames et messieurs, dans mon rapport au chef d'État et de gouvernement de l'Union africaine lors de la session extraordinaire du 25 novembre 2022, j'ai insisté sur l'urgence de travailler dans le sens de l'amélioration de la performance et de la fluidité des corridors existants, de la création de corridors maritimes et de la transformation des routes, notamment transsahariennes, en véritables corridors de la zone de libre-échange continentale africaine afin d'assurer la connexion entre l'Afrique du Nord et l'Afrique au sud du Sahara. Les voies de communication sont nécessaires pour assurer la libre circulation des personnes et des marchandises ainsi que des services. À l'heure où presque partout dans le monde, la distance n'est plus un obstacle à la fluidité des échanges, l'Afrique demeure le seul continent où, par manque d'infrastructures, les échanges commerciaux sont extrêmement faibles. À cette occasion, j'avais recommandé aux chefs d'État et de gouvernement la tenue d'un sommet extraordinaire sur le développement des infrastructures en Afrique. Infrastructures routières, ferroviaires, énergétiques, numériques, aéroportuaires et portuaires. Ces infrastructures constituent des instruments décisifs d'accélération de la mise en œuvre de la zone de libre-échange continentale africaine, des instruments qui permettront de réaliser la vision et de construire la prospérité du continent. Leur financement, comme le financement du développement en général, nécessitera des réformes profondes, notamment celle de l'architecture financière internationale. Je suis sûr qu'Afreximbank contribuera à cette réflexion. Je l'y encourage, je la félicite pour le travail déjà abattu, comme je félicite le secrétaire général de la ZLECAf pour ses efforts soutenus en vue de l'opérationnalisation de la zone de libre-échange continentale africaine, la zone d'échange, comme cela a été dit, la plus vaste du monde. Je vous remercie de votre aimable attention.
Another round of applause, please, for His Excellency, the former President of Niger and the AFCFTA champion, Mamadou Issoufou, His Excellency. The AFCFTA, to be realized, is going to take bold action. It's going to take ambition. A man that really embodies the entrepreneurial zeal and the possibility within the business world that is sort of embedded within the AFCFTA is a man you all know, and is the first person I think that comes to mind, the chairman of Dangote Group, Aliko Dangote, and he's here with us today. If I could just ask him to rise. Aliko Dangote. Now, Your Excellency, thank you for setting the scene, really, for the first discussion of this AGM. Now, the African Union has designated 2023 as the year of the acceleration of AFCFTA implementation. And this session is called Turbocharging Implementation of the AFCFTA. We've got a great panel, and we also have a great moderator who will introduce them. Please welcome to the stage the Editor-in-Chief of CNBC Africa, Godfrey Mutizwa.
Good morning, or should I say good afternoon. So I'm still stuck on whether I'm still on my Johannesburg time or I should transition to Accra time. I'm trying. So I'll say both good morning and good afternoon. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your time, for your attention, for your presence here. At CNBC Africa, we tell African stories, and this is one of the great stories of our time. There's no question about that. For those of you who are impatient with the implementation of Africa's historic African Continental Free Trade Area, AFCFTA, let me remind you, it's been about 2.5 years. That's 900.5 days to the end of the month. May I ask you to contrast that with the European Union and their Unity Project, or the North American Free Trade Area, or should we talk about ASEAN? Ladies and gentlemen, we have a baby. But the good news is that our baby isn't a complacent baby. Our baby is an extremely active baby. And on top of that, we're going to turbocharge our baby. Welcome to the first plenary session of the 2023 Afreximbank annual meetings, which is a special gathering this year, because this baby is also 30 years old. It is a happy, hearty anniversary, and a special thanks to the forefathers. I think it was October 1993 in Abuja that they set their foresight, foretold that as Africans we needed to have our own goods, sit on our shelves, and to feed ourselves and nourish our people. And for that, we needed Afreximbank. And it also gives me great pleasure to say, President Obasanjo, we salute you for your vision, for your foresight. Allow me to introduce our panel for our discussion today. May I call upon His Excellency Ambassador Albert Muchanga, Commissioner for Economic Development, Trade, Industry and Mining, the African Union. Ms. Flori Liza, President and CEO of Corporate Council on Africa. Dr. Asmani Asfour, President, African Business Council. And last but not least, Otunbani Adebayo, former Honorable Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment from Nigeria. Before we start, we're going to introduce to you a speech by Pamela Cook-Hamilton, Executive Director, the International Trade Center. Please listen in.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellency Professor Orama, let me start by expressing my heartfelt appreciation to you for extending this gracious invitation and for the long-standing close partnership that has flourished between our two organizations. It's an honor to address this esteemed gathering at the Afreximbank annual general meetings. Let me take a moment to congratulate the bank for the 30 years dedication to Africa's regional integration process and to acknowledge the remarkable work that Afreximbank has done in undertaking to support the growing African business sector. This commitment to private sector development and particularly to enterprise competitiveness is a shared value between our organizations, and we recognize the immense importance of empowering and enabling these enterprises, particularly the MSMEs, to thrive in the global marketplace. Under your visionary leadership, Mr. President, Afreximbank has become a beacon of hope and support for businesses and the entire private sector across Africa, specifically now under the AFCFTA. Since assuming office, you have brought about significant change and progress, particularly in fostering closer ties between Africa and the Caribbean, my home region. The first ever Africa-Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum in Barbados in September 2022 was a remarkable success in building bridges and opening doors, and ITC is proud to have been a partner in this journey. This effort has strengthened regional integration, created new opportunities, and kick-started a new promising era of economic cooperation between these regions. You continue to have ITC's full support to transform African-Caribbean trade and investment for shared prosperity. ITC is also partnering with Afreximbank through a corporate initiative to empower and enable MSMEs under the AFCFTA called One Trade Africa. A key achievement of our joint actions has been the development of capacity-building programs that have proven instrumental in equipping African businesses with the necessary skills and knowledge to thrive in international trade. Let me highlight our joint How to Export with the AFCFTA training program, which has empowered over 6,000 MSMEs through our free online curriculum. These MSMEs form the backbone of economies in Africa and must be supported to take advantage of new market opportunities offered by the AFCFTA. Together, we have also partnered with business support organizations in 15 countries to deliver deep dive national AFCFTA training workshops tailored to the national context. Our institutions have collaborated at the policy level to support South Sudan's national export and investment strategy, a 5-year plan with 9 priority sectors. This strategy aims to boost trade and investment through strategic planning, government support, and private sector leadership. In the African Union Year of AFCFTA Acceleration, we look forward to advancing our private sector-driven cooperation to support businesses and MSMEs to participate in transformation of intra-African trade. Let me take this opportunity to applaud Afreximbank's vision and foresight in convening the flagship intra-African trade fairs. These fairs have created the largest single marketplace in Africa, connecting thousands of businesses and MSMEs. ITC is fully committed to making the third edition of the IATF in Cairo a success. We have already started to train, mentor, and coach small businesses from across the continent to be ready to pitch trade and do businesses at trade fair. Together in Cairo, we will also convene a dedicated MSME masterclass on how to export and invest under the AFCFTA. This year, I also look forward to launching the first ever Pan-African Fashion Designers Cooperative with you at the Creative Africa Nexus Summit. This important initiative will provide designers in Africa with resources, services, and a collective voice to help each other and the industry. Critically, we look forward to working with the bank on the development of priority continental value chains, such as automotives, pharmaceuticals, and cotton textile. Ladies and gentlemen, as I conclude, let me reiterate my deepest appreciation to Your Excellency Professor Orama for his exceptional leadership, and to the entire Afreximbank senior management teams. The International Trade Center remains committed to our partnership with Afreximbank, working hand in hand to achieve our shared goals of promoting economic growth, fostering regional integration, and creating opportunities for all. I wish you fruitful deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pamela Cook-Hamilton, Executive Director, International Trade Center. I think we should call her an African champion, there's no question about it, on the work that she's doing around the continent and ensuring that we carry this vision forward. I wanted at the outset to spell out what is expected out of this session, so that at the end, if we have not done our job, I will not be paid. I promise you that. This session is expected to reflect on the slow progress that we have seen in trying to drive forward the AFCFTA from that momentous moment on January 1, 2021. We are supposed to learn and reflect on the key lessons that have come through the past 2.5 years and what we can do about it as a result of those lessons. Remember to reiterate the importance of the AFCFTA in ensuring that we diversify African economies and we see the economic integration of Africa. And lastly, but not least, we want to explore the importance of strengthening public-private partnerships. Or put simply, we want to explore options and ensuring that the private sector is driving this process, and it is happening on the African continent. So I'm going to begin by talking politics with Commissioner Muchanga. Commissioner, when you and your colleagues sat and gave us the vision and you gave us the platform to act, I want to know if we have achieved the milestones, the targets that you set out at the beginning to where we are today.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Before I answer that question, let me join the earlier speakers in congratulating very warmly the African Export-Import Bank for attaining 30 years, 30 progressive years of existence with very substantial delivery to the development of Africa. I say so also with a personal note of satisfaction. In March 2018, assisted by my then principal advisor, Babajide Sodipo, I opened the doors for the African Continental Free Trade Area, rather, for the African Export-Import Bank to enter the policy organs of the African Union system. And since then, they are part of us, as seen by the flag here. Now, this is something which really needs to be looked at in terms of the issues emerging. The theme for this year is accelerated implementation of the agreement establishing the African Continental Free Trade Area. And the theme now is turbocharging implementation of the agreement. And one of your opening statements was that there has been slow progress. And the earlier director of ceremony indicated that there is need for boldness and high ambition. And maybe I can add that visible results. Now, if you talk to some people, they give a qualification. If the African Continental Free Trade Area succeeds, the key word there is if, which suggests that in their minds, they are not very, very, very sure. And again, if you take survey results from the African Export-Import Bank, the International Trade Center, the Economic Commission for Africa, who are here, the message that comes out, and this is a survey of the African private sector's knowledge of the African Continental Free Trade Area. You take all these three survey results, and they've been doing that since 2021. Less than 50% of the African private sector understand the African Continental Free Trade Area. The next stage is that, as we are talking now, it's very, very, very difficult for one to say, these are the results, statistical results, of the contribution of the African Continental Free Trade Area to the growth of intra-African trade. So against that background, I would go with those who say, yes, maybe we need to give more energy to the process of implementation. And I'll come back to that later in the discussion so that I don't monopolize the floor. The issue of the role of the Council of Ministers, leadership. There's a role for them to play to ensure that it's turbocharged. I'll stop here for now.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you. If you were to reflect just a little bit on some of those key holdups in terms of achieving the targets that you wanted, what would you identify those are? I don't know. I can just maybe give us a couple.
Okay, now to give that a context, the former president of Niger is sitting right in front of me. The heads of state and government, when they rolled out the roadmap for the negotiation of the agreement establishing, that time it was called the Continental Free Trade Area, would not add the term African. They gave a deadline of December 2017. And when we met in Niger in December 2017, the chief negotiators were saying we cannot conclude the agreement. We still need some more time. And I said, I cannot go beyond the deadline issued by the heads of state and government. And two, if I allow that, it's going to reduce momentum. So I went to His Excellency the President and said, Your Excellency, this is the state of affairs. My recommendation is that when you address the ministers, African ministers of trade, you inform them very directly that you want them to sit on their own as ministers and look at all the brackets which are outstanding. And before they leave Niger, they should come and give you a concrete result. And that meeting should be restricted to only delegations with ministers. His Excellency accepted that recommendation. And we got a room, and my then principal advisor, Babajide Sodipo, was the gate man. He ensured that only ministers attended that meeting, plus the chairperson of the chief negotiators. Within 3 hours, all the brackets were removed. They were all removed. went to the plenary, and I expected some sort of war to emerge. And indeed, there was a war. Some of the delegations were saying, what you did is to undermine the principle of sovereign equality of states. Others were pointing fingers at me. We are going to report you to our ministers. And I replied, I said, the principle of sovereign equality of states should be measured. There is also a sovereign obligation to exercise that principle of sovereign equality. Each member state is obliged to bring delegates of equal rank to the meetings that are taking place. It's a ministerial meeting, there should be ministers. Chief negotiators, there should be chief negotiators. Similar for experts. There are some delegations which come. They start as senior experts, they are chief negotiators, they are ministers. That is not an obligation of sovereign equality. And for those of you who want to report me, feel free. And they did. And some of the ministers said, when we met them on the 12th ministerial meeting of the WTO in Argentina, my brother, my chief negotiator, came to report on what happened in Niger. And I told him what the commissioner did is right. If I was in his shoes, I would do exactly the same, because we have an historic obligation to conclude the negotiations.
Sure.
And the others, others, because these are things you need to know. Others said, Commissioner, you write a letter to the chairperson, to the champion, saying what was agreed in Niger is null and void. I said, no. I do not report to one member state. I report to the collective whole. And at the end of the day, all those who are resisting accepted, and 18th March, we signed the agreement. So if now you see a situation where there is resistance, you need to use political instinct and say, politically, how do we move out of this logjam?
Yeah.
Logjam. If you don't do that, you stall.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I love it. Thank you, Commissioner, for those insights. And I'm wondering, as I sit here, if one of those ministers who was in this cauldron is sitting here beside us.
From Nigeria, there was a lady minister. From Ghana, Alan, Minister Alan. From South Africa, I don't know if he's from here, Minister Patel. I don't know if they are here.
Thank you. Thank you. So it gives me an opportunity to come to former Minister Adebayo and ask the question. I think the Commissioner has been very frank. I think one of the things that we have said about the FCFTA has been the political commitment, which has been absolutely unwavering. But I think inside, we see that inside that political commitment, there are also very key things that are considered by the technical people that they have to deal with. I want the insight of the former Minister of Trade from Nigeria to weigh in, number one, on those things that have held us, and perhaps you can pick up on a few things that the Commissioner has said. We have a few minutes, so I'll hurry you up a little bit.
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, I think one of the problems that we have had is the fact that each country has wanted to project their own interests over and beyond the collective interest. We find that when we meet, each of our colleagues always pushing the individual interests of their country. The Secretary General has had a very, very difficult time putting us all in line, because whenever we meet, like I said, individual interests come to the fore. For instance, we do recognize that this is an agreement, this is something that has to work for the benefit of all Nigerians. But I think, luckily I'm no longer an official minister, so I think I can speak a bit freely without getting into trouble. I think the major problem that we have had is the individual interests that we have been projecting for our countries. For instance, when we were talking about automotive, for instance, for example, we looked at it, and every country in Africa wants to assemble motor vehicles.
Yeah.
Every country cannot assemble motor vehicles. So we try to sit down and look at a way by which we say, let us decide that, say, 4 or 5 countries will do the assembling of motor vehicles. We will look at other countries and they will do the components that will go into the motor vehicles as a way of compensating them so that they add value to what is being done. But even at that, to arrive at the number of countries, and those countries that will be the ones to produce the motor vehicles, is a problem, because every country is insistent that they are the ones that want to do that thing. So we have a major problem in that regard. I think going forward, a lot of work has to be done by the heads of state, and that because the original initiative is from the heads of state, they have looked at it. It is a dream that they have, that we should have a single African market, such that there's inter-trade between all the countries in Africa. So I believe that they should impress it more on the officials to look at the bigger picture as opposed to the smaller picture. Like I said, we have countries trying to protect their own turf. Yes. We have regional bodies, the ECOWASs, the different regional bodies as well. And, you know, these are all areas that have interests that are ingrained. So I think we have to get our mindset out of what we are used to and look at the bigger picture and see how we can actually make
so we need to turbocharge the politics again, like we did at the beginning.
Indeed, yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Minister. Dr. Asfo, I'm coming to you as a close, keen observer of the process that the politicians have been driving. And I have to recognize that in this instance, they have been far, far faster, I think in many cases, than business. But you have a closer view than me. Your observations.
So thank you very much. Let me first congratulate Afreximbank for 30 years of very, very, very strong support to the private sector, actually. So as Africa Business Council, established by the Heads of State Decision Summit to be the voice of the African private sector, our competitive founding vision is a competitive, borderless, innovative Africa for trade, investment, and industrialization. And our membership includes all the RECs, business councils, chambers of commerce, private sector federations, union of industries, manufacturing associations, big corporates, SMEs, women entrepreneurs, and youth entrepreneurs. So our take for the ACFTA, Africa Continental Free Trade Area is really our flagship for Africa's prosperity. That's why we really envisage it. But how can we do it, and how can we reach there? For the private sector, we see that our strategy is embedded in 3 pillars, 3 Ps. Private sector empowerment, policy advocacy, and product developments. When we're talking about policy advocacy, we need the governments to have incentives for the African private sector. When my investors, the Africa private sector, want to invest in a project, they would need really preferential treatment. They would need incentives. They would need enabling environment for the investment within the African continent. His Excellency, the champion of ACFTA, in Niger, there is a lot of cattle, while there is no dairy products manufacturing. Milk is still imported from France. We need to see, if I bring the investors within Niger to invest, what are the enabling environment? How we can make incentives for our African investors? On another note, if we talk about healthcare industry, you know that in Africa, 80% are dying from cancer compared to 24% from the Western world, because there is no investment in healthcare industry, in early diagnosis and treatment for cancer. My sister Nardos here is working very hard for the implementation of Africa Leaders for Health. The investors can go and invest, but what is the take from the politicians? How can the public-private sector succeed? And what is the governments really doing for preferring our African private sector? One of the advocacy pillars also we are working on is to have at least 40% of all government procurement goes to African private sector. I cannot imagine that right now we are importing $50 billion per year food from outside the continent, while we have 60% arable land in Africa. In order to invest, we need the private sector.
Absolutely, and in the process we are weakening our exchange rates because that $50 billion is in foreign exchange, another subject that we need to talk about. But very quickly, 2 points. One, the commissioner referred to a survey, and it's pointing a finger at you. I want your answer to that. Why, how is it possible that the very people who are intended to benefit from the AfCFTA do not know about the AfCFTA? And then secondly, are you pointing a finger at the politicians and saying, yes, you have talked, you have put the policy framework, but you have not done the practical work that enables us to create African goods and trade amongst ourselves?
So thank you very much, because with my first pillar about private sector empowerment, sensitization about AfCFTA is very important. Private sector is not homogeneous. We have the big corporates, and we have the SMEs, we have the women entrepreneurs, even we have the rural women across the whole Africa that are trying to sell their own vegetables and friends, and now they don't know about AfCFTA. The cross-border women traders, they don't know about AfCFTA. We have done several actually training programs, and that's when our strategic plan to do training programs and sensitization for the private sector to know about AfCFTA, but know also about the investment opportunities. So we have making now a mapping exercise, what's existing on the continent and how we can trade among ourselves. Like for instance, pharmaceuticals.